All right, hello. Can folks hear me? Good to see some familiar faces in the crowd. Thank you for joining us. Let's fill up the room here. We've got space on this side as well. I know it's a full house, so really appreciate everybody making the journey here. My name is Saad. I'm a product manager at Databricks. I work with my colleague here, Peter Nordhaus. We're going to talk about DABs, our Databricks Asset Bundles, today. So if that's what you came here for, you're in the right room. You'll see this slide in virtually every presentation today. So just keep this in mind, that we are among friends. We'll share as much as we can with folks here. But things might change a little bit. But just keep this in mind. So thank you for accommodating that. And then just to make sure you're in the right room, we'll cover the what, why, and how of Databricks Asset Bundles. And we'll go into some level of detail, but don't worry, we'll take everybody along for the ride. We'll go through some of the best practices on what we've learned from customers, what we've actually built into the platform, and obviously the goodies, all the new stuff that we've been working on, and then obviously talking a little bit about what the future is, so we'll gaze into the crystal ball. But before we begin, maybe by a show of hands, how many people here already are familiar with Databricks Asset Bundles? So, okay, of course, it's in the title.
Yeah,
okay.
No, that's
how many have actually used them? Okay, keep your hands up. And how many are using it in production? Wow. Okay, we have to bring our A game, Peter.
Yeah.
And how many have 100% of everything on DABs? Wow.
Oh,
all right.
Nice.
So maybe you should, we might ask some of you to come up here and give the talk. But anyway, enough talking. I'll hand it over to Peter to take us through this.
All right. Yeah, this is it's great to see a lot of folks familiar with DABs. We're going to cover some of the basics for folks who are not yet familiar with DABs. So I hope there are maybe some new bits for you in there as well. Maybe not, but let's see where it goes. So the what, why, and how. Why did we build Databricks Asset Bundles in the first place? Well, as software engineers, there's a couple practices that you've gotten used to. Maybe in the 90s you would use FTP servers and move code around, but that's like not happening for a long time anymore, right? Like we all use GitHub, GitLab, Azure DevOps, or other tools to store our code and do version control, right? We do that so that we have a history of all the changes that went in, so that we can effectively collaborate with our teams and get code review on the changes that we propose. So we want to apply those same practices to data projects that you build on top of Databricks. That when working with Databricks, you should be able to apply those same practices. Another one of them is testing, right? I'm sure everyone has built the odd notebook where you encode everything in a single notebook and you just hit start and you hope for the best. But that doesn't really scale if you have a larger team that you're working with, and encoding the assumptions that you make about your code or the environment or the input data sets in tests is actually a very effective way to make sure you don't regress over time. Automated deployment is another one. Like, sure, you can copy code between two workspaces or multiple folders. But how about those jobs or the pipelines that you associate with them? Right? You want to take everything that's associated with your data project and deploy that, or be able to deploy that to deploy multiple copies, potentially to different workspaces. And then the last one is about environment separation. If you are working with a colleague, let's say Saad and I are both working on a data project, and I'm working on some new feature, I don't want Saad doing some development actually clobbering my tables and vice versa. Or that I'm writing some changes in my code and Saad's changes are interfering with mine, right? We want individual, independent copies to do that development and then send those changes off for code review to get a second pair of eyes and proceed with the whole flow. So in the context of Databricks, what does this mean? We want to have a reproducible definition of a project. And that means the code, so the notebooks, the Python files, the dashboards, maybe some alerts or some other things that are part of the workspace. We want to take that. We want to get the resource configuration So perhaps you've scheduled a job for your code, perhaps you have created a pipeline or 10, and they're all part of this definition of your project. We want to take that as well, that configuration. And then lastly, we also want to know about the permissioning. Maybe you want to share all of these resources, like with a view permission to all of your teams. Like, hey, I'm developing something, can you have a quick look? Right? It's effective to then share all of this stuff as a whole with your team. Now, that definition needs to be committable, right? It needs to materialize to a set of files, because then we can use version control to keep history, collaborate, and it needs to be a portable definition. Sure, I can hard code a bunch of IDs and URLs and whatnot in it, but that means it's not portable between workspaces, so we need to be able to make it portable so we can target that definition to multiple workspaces. And then lastly, this definition, we want to be able to interact with it from multiple places, right? If I have a local laptop and I'm writing my Python code in VS Code, let's say, on my laptop, I want to edit those source files and interact with that deployment as well, just like doing it from a CI runner or elsewhere. So a typical flow for this collaborative scenario would look like this. All right, so I have a project, Saad and I have a project, it's chugging along nicely, but we get a feature request, so I'm going to create a feature branch, and to start off my work, I'm going to deploy a personal copy of this project, and I get an isolated environment. Again, because if I do some iterative work, I don't want to be touching my production tables, right? I want to write to some development timetables such that, well, I can make mistakes. It's fine to play around and make sure to iterate before you're happy with your changes, but that needs to be in isolation of other people or production. And that holds for all of my team members. If they get started with a new change, they get their own copy of the project. Then when I'm happy, I'll make a pull request, perhaps in GitHub parlance. In GitLab, that's a little different, or Azure DevOps, but the concept is the same. I propose my changes, and then as part of that proposal of changes, I'd like some automation to go out and create another deployment. Because then, on that deployment, I can maybe run the pipeline again, confirm with maybe perhaps data quality checks, perhaps with other assertions, that this proposed change actually works end-to-end. Again, an isolated catalog, and then once we get the green check marks, everyone's happy with the change, we can release it to like a main branch or a release branch, and do another authoritative deployment to our production deployment. So far I haven't mentioned dabs. So what is dabs? It's a YAML-based configuration format that allows you to capture the workspace settings, workspace configuration, permissioning, all of the resources that you have under management, like jobs, pipelines, but also Unity catalog resources like schemas or volumes. The code, like this configuration format, or these files live side by side with the code that you're using. Right? It can be just a couple of notebooks, or it can be many different Python wheels. It doesn't really matter how you lay out your code. And we want to be able to support environment-specific overrides. So if I have a cluster in dev, maybe I want to use only 2 workers, because I'm not processing that much data, but in prod I want to have 32 workers. Then I don't want to, well, copy that whole definition, I just want to do a very targeted override. Why is this useful? It brings structure and automation to projects, makes collaboration easier, like no risky manual deployments, no room for human error, because all these deployments are based off of the spec, right? The definition, these configuration files. The entry point for a Databricks Asset Bundle is always a file called databricks.yaml that contains some stanzas that we'll look at in a little bit as well. You can deploy these Databricks Asset Bundles through our Databricks CLI, through CI/CD, or the Workspace UI, as we'll see in a little bit. And we also have template support. So if you have like a data engineering team or a data platform team at your company, maybe they want to be prescriptive on the type of projects that people build, encode same defaults, and use templating for that. But I'll hand it back to Saad for a second to talk about how it's going so far.
Awesome, thank you, Peter. So one of the things that, this question does come up a lot. It's like, hey, can I take a dependency on this, and is this thing GA? And I just wanted to take a little moment to talk about the history of what happened. So we ran a preview with one customer for about a year. There was a lot of foundational elements that we were building. Obviously, we're building with the CLI, authentication, all of that comes with it. And then we ran a fairly long public preview. And this is very uncommon for Databricks because we like to move fast. But here we were building a pretty foundational piece that we wanted to make sure was as future-proof as possible. We GA'd last year in April, and now we're basically in the run phase. And what that means, so all my charts are sort of go to the right and up, it's how we want to see this. But what's been happening is like a very steady clip of updates that have been going on. This is just the highlight reel. But the key point here is that it's on. Like we're really launching features, supporting new asset types, more capabilities. We'll cover some of them in here. And an interesting thing, we were looking at some of our numbers, and 70% of the users are actually human. And to any other crowd, people would be like, what do you mean 70% of users are human? But this crowd obviously knows there's a lot of automation service principles, but that means that people use this in their day-to-day with their inner dev loop. So definitely this thing is GA, it's ready for production, so if you're using it, great, continue using it. And then let's maybe do a little walkthrough here. Peter.
A little walkthrough, excellent. So far, high-level concepts, but let's see how the rubber meets the road. So I have here open a Databricks.yaml file, and I'll just talk a little bit about the different stanzas that we see here, and also different resources that are part of this bundle. It's a bit of a demo, a little bit hello world that does some processing with NYC, taxi, trips data sets, but for demonstration purposes, that's fine. So a Databricks.yaml file always, the location of it is what we call the bundle root, and all the code needs to be nested under that bundle root, typically, right? So all of the code that is in that folder where Databricks.yaml is located will be synchronized into the workspace, and we'll be able to reference that from your jobs and pipelines and so forth. Now, the Databricks.yaml is only the entry point, and we call it the entry point because you can actually include other configuration files. We do this because, well, it's better to modularize this. Maybe you want to have one file per resource, or stick your variable definitions in another file, or maybe reuse some configuration between multiple bundles, right? And maybe you have a common set of resources you want to reuse across bundles. Using multiple files makes that much easier, as opposed to just sticking everything in a single file. So let's take a look at one of these resources. So we're going to take a look at a job. And what we see here is that we have this resources block, then we have a jobs block, and then we have a job that we call by key here the NYC taxi job. The entire payload that you see here is one-to-one, maps one-to-one to the REST APIs. So if you ever wonder what are the supported fields, will like a certain new field in the API, when is it going to be available in dabs? Well, the answer is as soon as we got a new CLI release, because this supply chain of new fields being specified in our API specs and going into dabs is completely transparent. This job will run daily, and again, this is just how the jobs API looks, so you can kind of infer from that. We have a set of parameters that we define, so job parameters in this case. We pass a catalog and a schema parameter. The catalog is hard-coded in this case, but the interesting part is the schema parameter, not hard-coded. We actually refer to another resource here, which is a schema, and the name of that schema. Now, if Saad and I both do a deployment, that name will be different, right? So this job will actually refer to the Saad development schema or the Peter development schema when we deploy, depending on the identity of the person doing the deploy. We also have a couple of tasks. We run a pipeline, and again, this pipeline ID, if you look at any materialized job, this pipeline ID will be an ID, right? It will be UUID, but that doesn't make our configuration portable, right? And that's the property we were talking about a little bit before. This needs to be portable. So we refer to the ID by the resource specifier here, and we can open it later, and it will be materialized at deploy time as well. So in order to deploy this job, we'll first deploy the pipeline, get the ID, interpolate it here, and then deploy the job. We can compute some anomalies. The interesting part here is that we refer to a notebook path by relative path. So this YAML file is located under resources, so we can do /source and index it there. At deployment time, this will expand into the full path in the workspace, right? So this makes it, again, better portable for different people or different deployments, because the full paths will be different for Saad and myself. And then lastly, we'd like to refresh a dashboard, right? We do a little bit of data processing, we figure out some anomalies, and then we want to refresh a dashboard. And the similar arguments hold there. If you look at, you may have already seen that when I hover, you get a little bit of description. And that's also, again, one-to-one with API definitions. It also means that we get this neat auto-completion, where we can see what are the different tasks or properties that we can specify here. It's just kind of nice to have, but I did want to call it out. I won't go over the other resources in this bundle because, I don't want to run out of time. So let's move on. Bundle variables, what are they? Well, you can hard code a bunch of things in your bundle definition, but some things you actually don't know when you're writing your bundle, and they need to be injected at deployment time. Or they need to be different for your development or production target deployments. And that's where variables come in. They can either be set here like here and take a default in the configuration. You can use environment variables or command line flags to set them. But another flavor are lookup variables. So some resources in a workspace will always be kind of shared or common resources, right? We expect them to be created by administrators. Maybe these are shared SQL warehouses, shared all-purpose clusters. Maybe there's cluster policy IDs or stuff like that. There will be one instance of each in every workspace that you maintain. But again, that portability is very important. So instead of hard coding those IDs in your bundle configuration, which would turn that bundle configuration tied to a specific workspace, we support lookups by name. So as long as you use the same name to refer to these resources, we'll do that translation, again, at deployment time. Permissions, mentioned it before, I'll skip over this actually quite quick because, it kind of speaks for itself. This will give all of the people in this group can view access to all of the resources that are in the bundle. Very convenient if you want to share the stuff you're working on with your team. And then we get to targets. So what are targets? We call them deployment targets, and they allow for slight nuances to be applied to the bundle configuration. So in here, we call it development. It could also have been called foobar. The name doesn't really matter. But we set it to mode development to tell the bundle CLI to treat it as a development mode target, which means all jobs will be paused, and we make sure that the display names of resources are getting prefixes, so we can easily differentiate between Saad and my copies, and so on and so forth. And here, we can also, again, set these variables, right? We can set the variable to say, oh, you know what, maybe in dev, I don't want to read from the full NYC taxi trip data, but only like a couple of days. Because if I do my processing on a couple days worth of data, that's good enough for development. But in production, I want to get the full slice, right? It allows you to apply patterns like this. Then we have a production target as well, with one more nuance I think is worth sharing, is that you can apply overrides at the resource level. So we saw this NYC taxi job definition before, but what happens here is that it will be augmented for this production target to say, when I deploy this job in production, we're also going to add email notifications. You can override any other property in here, so if you want to override the number of workers in your cluster, that's fine. If you want to add, change other settings, that's also fine. But it removes the need for copy and pasting that entire definition and keeping multiple copies, right? You only want to change certain parts of it. Let's see, I'll skip this for a second. What I want to show next is how do I actually interact with this bundle. I'll show the file tree for a second here actually. So we have a couple more resources like a dashboard, job, pipeline, and schema. We have a couple sources like a notebook, a dashboard definition, LV-JSON, and some pipeline sources. So that's the entirety of this bundle. And then if I want to, I'll do this. If I want to interact with it, I can just use the Databricks CLI and run Databricks bundle validate, for example. And what that will do is load all the configuration, make sure all the paths are fine, and output a little bit of information about the bundle that we're working with. In this case, there's 2 warnings, but that's just because they're examples, so it's correct that they don't match, but we don't need to do anything about it. The second kind of core verb that we would want to do is a deployment. So I run a Databricks bundle deploy. What that does, it copies all those files in the bundle root into the workspace and materializes all the resources that we've defined. So the jobs will be either created, updated, or if you've removed the definition from the bundle configuration, it will be removed. We're on conference Wi-Fi, but it is completing, so that's actually very nice and surprising. We'll also show the bundle summary for a second. And it just lists all the resources that are part of it. So I can now just open this dashboard, for example, and I don't know where it went. Oh, there it is. Well, okay, so we have my Dev Peter NYC taxi trip dashboard, and we can just take a look at how it's going. And I think with that we'll conclude this short demo. Oh, actually, no, sorry, Saad. There's one more thing. And this has been around for a while, so don't expect like breaking new announcements now with the one more thing. But the VS Code extension that we have also knows about bundles and gives you a little bit more information about your bundle state. So as we're like opened this bundle here in the VS Code, the bundle resource explorer pane will show you the list of resources that are part of it, and will allow you to interact with them. So if I want to kick off a run, I can just click the play icon here. Want to run a pipeline update, I click these. I can also click here, which is kind of nifty. Click jump to definition, and it'll just open up the file with the definition of that pipeline. So it makes it a bit easier to work with bundles from VS Code. Let's go back to best practices.
We may have to run through these a little bit faster.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Go for it.
So best practice, why do you need separate development and production environments? Now, strictly speaking, you don't need to have separate development and production environments. In fact, we have some customers who have only one workspace and say this is both dev and staging and prod, and we don't care. But if you're in regulated industries, or you need a little bit more assurances on either information leakage, or you want to lock down permissioning and whatnot, it does make sense to have environment isolation and use different workspaces for these different environments. So as we said kind of before, it allows you to tune resource sizes, set ingest paths, alerting, that type of stuff. But it also allows you to have these isolated deployments, like, again, the collaborative scenario for Saad and myself, where we both want to have separate copies that don't interfere with each other. I guess this is a repeat of what I already showed live, so I'll skip over this one. Variables can be substituted, again, in the Databricks.yaml. We have top-level variable overrides, and you can specify them through the CLI flags or environment variables. Another thing that we support and allows you to better modularize your configuration is complex valued variables. So instead of just primitive types like strings and integers or booleans, you can actually specify whole objects, and that allows you to do more reuse of your complex variables. So then, iterative development, how do I test this? The verbs, again, I'll run through it quickly as I kind of showed it already. I gave away the beans. But validate is the core primitive you can kind of do to get a gut check. Are there any blatant errors in my config that I need quick feedback on? Right now, we don't run that all the time in the background, but for example, in this VS Code extension, I can see us doing that in the future to immediately give you some squigglies or give you much faster feedback on like what's happening in your configuration. When you deploy, again, all of the code is synchronized into the workspace and the resources are materialized. That's relatively fast in development mode, but because all of this stuff is incremental, and we're looking to speed that up even more. The last verb that we that I didn't show yet is bundle run. It allows you to interact with your jobs and pipelines from the command line. So if you want to, let's say in CI/CD, run an integration test job, right? You would compose that and say, first I want to do a deploy, then I want to run my integration test job, and that will just block until it either succeeds or fails, and giving you that, well, positive or negative signal on the quality of the changes. What if every new project came with best practices built in? Templates. So if you want to get started with a bundle, we don't want to ask you, hey, just open a file, empty file, Databricks, call it Databricks.yaml, and start chopping away at it, right? That's kind of a high bar to entry. And in fact, we have built templates for bundles to make that first user experience much, much better. So you can run this command, Databricks bundle init, you get a pre-initialized bundle configuration with some boilerplate that you can use as a starting point. The thing is though, and we have a couple built-in templates, right, for Python, SQL, MLOps stacks is another popular template.
You'll actually see a new template probably when Leonard gives his talk. There he is, on Lakeflow as well, so stay tuned for that.
And, but templates aren't only useful for us to kind of be very prescriptive about the getting started flow. If you have, or if you're a part of a data platform team in your organization, you might want to author these templates to give all your customers a good getting started point, right? To do all the right stuff with respect to these variable lookups, the resource sizing, code layout, and so on and so forth, right? So if you want to encode the best practices for your organization, encoding those as templates, whether or not you use these templates or a different templating mechanism, that's not, I don't think that matters much. We prefer, of course, these because we can give better integration and all that. But being prescriptive about the structure is very useful for, well, scaling out DABS adoption in your organization. What does a modern deployment workflow look like? Well, that always involves CI/CD pipelines. And Databricks, we don't do CI/CD like natively, right? We don't host code either. We allow you to check out code. But that always comes from code hosting services, and that can be private Git repositories, but also, of course, GitHub, Azure DevOps, GitLab, Bitbucket, and so forth. And frequently, those vendors also have CI/CD solutions, where if there are certain triggers on those repositories, you can kick off workflows. And in these workflows, you can interact with the Databricks CLI to, again, run those same verbs that you run locally on your laptop, but now you're running them from CI. If you're on GitHub, we have a very neat GitHub action that easily sets up the CLI for you. And one thing that actually we failed to include in this slide, but which is very interesting, is that we recently launched workload identity federation support on the auth side. So if you've ever set this up before and you've been kind of maintaining personal access tokens and you had to refresh those and whatnot, that'll be a thing of the past because you can use OpenID Connect with your service principals in Databricks to exchange, to get short-lived tokens and not have to deal with secrets in your CI/CD workflow. So that I think it's very technical, but that's really a game changer for people who have to deal with administrating these things. Another thing, like as we're talking about adoption, how can I bring existing jobs, pipelines, or whatever into a bundle? And the answer is yes. Pipelines associated state, right? You have a pipeline, you compute a bunch of tables, maybe it costs a bunch of money to compute those. So ideally, you don't want to throw that out and recompute the whole thing just for adopting DABs. And that's what we allow with these two verbs. So it is possible to first generate the config for any live object that you already have in the workspace with the generate command. You can do that once. You can also do that multiple times if you're changing the code in the web UI and want to see how it reflects on the configuration. And the second verb is the bind command or verb that allows you to associate one of these resource keys, right, the NYC taxi job in the example I just showed, and associate them with an ID. Once you've executed this, the DABs will take ownership of that instance, and updates will go into that job. So what's new? This is like a lot of content so far, but it's all stuff that we've already shipped, right? It's done. So, but it's not done, of course. Like we have a bunch more coming, and here's like this is I guess the highlight reel.
I think so.
Saad.
I think so. Yeah. I think so. I gave a talk earlier today on workflows. That's my other day job. I don't get paid twice. But anyway, so customers are like, hey, you've got this YAML thing, and it's great, but I have 100 jobs that I need to update. I need to provide some sort of mechanism to automate the build out of my workflow. So Python for Dabs, PyDabs, if you will, is something we just launched in public preview a couple of months ago. So that helps you kind of take that next level of next graduation step. I think we might have an example. I'm going to breeze through this maybe. So on this one, just very quickly, we have these decorators that we've defined. On this one, it's a job mutator. So that example that I was giving you for 100 jobs, let's say you want to tag them specifically, or you want to have notifications set up, you can use this in Python in a declarative format that can be done in a few lines of code. Now, the thing that I'm really excited about is the Alice and Bob story. So we get this all the time. So most likely, a lot of folks in this room are DAB native. You're probably part of some data team that is responsible for building out this governance on code and build these guardrails for all your users. And my spirit animal is Bob, which is the data analyst. And I work in the workspace, and it's hard. Like these, I don't use an IDE. I don't know how to use a CLI. What's this YAML thing? So we wanted to bridge that together with, wait for it, dabs in the workspace. So basically, what we do with that is we give you a deploy button. And I think we might have a little demo here. Maybe I can kind of switch over.
Let's see if we can pull it up.
There we go. And I'll just hit refresh. That's the magic magic button. So so what you see here is the same project that Peter was talking about earlier. It lives inside a Git folder, because the idea is that the Alice and Bob story I was telling you, they need to collaborate on the project together. So it is, if you open up a Git folder, you will be able to see this create new asset bundle dropdown. And in this case, we just cloned the repo that Peter had. And there's a number of things that I just want to quickly call out. So this is the same stuff that Peter just deployed. And the nice thing here is, because it's the same user, it's the same workspace, it's the same bundle, that means I don't want to deploy something new. Peter is working on his instance of the project. There's a couple of things that you see in here with this nice rocket icon. One is you can navigate to the source code, which is up here. And the other thing is you see the target. So the deployment targets that Peter was talking about, whether you're development or staging. Now, one question that I know is already coming up, it's welling up, is, hey, I don't want this guy to deploy, I don't want Saad to deploy in production. And so that's actually a valid case. In this particular instance, production and development are the same workspace. But typically, production deploys happen through CI/CD. And if it's a different workspace, it actually gets grayed out. So you will not allow Saad or Bob, in this case, to deploy into production. And then the other thing is the CLI is basically invoked by this interface using this deploy button. And it'll tell you what is going to happen. So it actually detected a change, because Peter just did a deploy. So what I had in my definition here, because I haven't synced from Git and Peter didn't commit, so not the best practice, Peter. But it detected what changes are made. And when I deploy it, it'll give me a nice little deployment output panel to see how and what was created. And then I can actually go jump to those resources as well. Now, one quick thing, because we're going to run out of time very soon, is let me just go into the Git folder, and I can actually create, this is what I was telling you. This is the other entry point for the bundle. And when you do that, you have this nice drawer that kind of slides in. And these are the templates that Peter was talking about earlier. And you'll see a nice update to this one tomorrow. Is it tomorrow? When is the Lakeflow talk? But we'll list out all the talks here as well. But over time, you want to be able to support custom templates as well, because obviously you want to enforce the standards and the structure that you have within your projects. And then the thing that I really like is this little icon. So I'm a sucker for good icons. I think that is probably it on the demo.
Or on the demo. Okay,
on the demo,
so
yeah, we can probably
let's
back.
flip back here.
Yes.
And let's see what else. What the future holds.
Well, so the most important thing, I think, for us is to just keep steady pace with all the improvements that are happening on the platform. And by that, I mean new features that teams are constantly building out. And we're making some pretty fundamental changes into how we kind of discover that, and so that whatever you see shows up as you can dabify this as soon as possible. Like this, someone was asking me today about Genie workspaces. I told them to go add that to the thing. The other thing we want to have is some sort of a server-side state of what the bundle is. Now we can go into detail about how we actually implement this, but the key thing is you want to be able to track the history of who deployed what and when. If somebody went outside the chain and made some changes and broke glass, you want to be able to discover that. And then I think with the functionality that we've added now within the workspace, that just opens up the user base quite dramatically, right? One of the first things people ask about is like, okay, I still have to do this YAML thing, right? And that is true, but we are building those capabilities where you should be able to serialize your changes from the UI, from the visual experience for the Bobs, and that you can serialize them into YAML. So you can actually continue to do your source control and use the same underlying project and configuration that you have. And then adding, you saw the import or the generate and bind command. We want to bring that there as well. And then obviously help improve performance for this. And you learned a lot more. We regularly meet with customers, so obviously if you have questions, do reach out to us. And I think we have some talks. Yes, perfect. So the one that I've been talking about constantly is the first one up here, which is Lakeflow. We integrate quite closely with Lakeflow. Our colleagues Leonard and Adriana are going to talk about that. And then a number of actually folks in this room and our friends and partners are doing, actually Dustin did a talk already this morning, and then there's a few more coming up. So please do check those out. And in the 2 minutes, 52 seconds that remain, we can answer questions